Today we're going to be predicting every single Senate race on this map. Before we do that, I always appreciate when you guys like and subscribe. Please do that right now if you have the opportunity. And now we'll be getting to the likely states. We'll start with likely and end with tilt. For the first likely state, we'll start with the Democrats this time. We have the state of Minnesota. Very long history of voting blue. I don't think anything will be different this time around. Minnesota has been in the news quite a bit since the beginning of the second Trump administration, well, and before, showing quite a few signs that they are definitely not a big fan of the Trump presidency and Republicans in general. They've consistently elected Democrats. The Senate race is virtually certainly going to end up in the Democratic Party's column. The gubernatorial race in this state also is looking really good for Democrats, so nothing too crazy there. That's going to be the call there in Minnesota. And now we're going to head over to the likely red states. We're going to start with South Carolina. If I remember correctly, this is Lindsey Graham's seat. He's up for re-election. I do ultimately think he will win, but the fact that Democrats were able to narrow a state that's generally in the safe column all the way to a likely, certainly not the most impressive state, Democrats will have a performance in with this prediction, but still certainly impressive. One more seat for the Republicans, 44 to 44. For the Republicans to win control of the Senate, they only need to win 6 of the 12 seats that have yet to be called. We'll see if that's possible. For Democrats, they need to win 7. That is because of J.D. Vance and the tie-breaking vote in the case of a 50-50 Senate. J.D. Vance, since he's the vice president, would be the tiebreaker. But we're going to go now to the next state in the likely column, that being the state of Montana. This state, similarly to South Carolina, used to be in the safe red column. The state actually has had a Democratic senator fairly recently. The most recent one was lost his election bid, Jon Tester, in 2024, ultimately fell short, and Democrats are hoping they can flip, and the Republican for this seat is retiring, so neither party has incumbency advantage. Democrats are hoping they can capitalize on that by being able to narrow it up. I don't think they're going to win. Democrats are probably hopeful they will, but I think at the end of the day, it'll still be a Republican seat. That's going to be the seat there in Montana. Then we're going to head all the way down to Florida. Florida, I'm going to put that into the the likely red column. I think it's certainly possible it could end up in the lean red column, but it'll be interesting to see how some key voting demographic groups end up treating Democrats and Republicans alike. We've seen quite a few voting demographic groups shift away from Trump and Republicans in general with the handling of the economy. So we'll see if that state is an example where things narrow up. At the end of the day, I still think it'll be a Republican victory, but that's going to be the call there in Florida. And then that will be the end of the likely red states. Now we're going to go to the lean blue, starting out with the state of North Carolina. Interestingly enough, this is going to be a flip for the Democratic Party. The incumbent Republican senator is retiring, which gives Democrats a good position to flip the Senate seat. They have a former popular Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, who is running for the Senate seat here. He's a strong pick. I think he will do quite well. He's done well in the past on the gubernatorial level. And I think if he can win the state, he can win the state for the Senate in an environment that's much more favorable for Democrats. That's going to be the call there in North Carolina. One more seat flipped from red to blue. And then this state actually is held from blue to blue, but Georgia currently has 2 Democratic senators. One of them is up for re-election, Jon Ossoff. He has a very strong fundraising game. He's done well in the polling. He is doing quite well in the prediction markets. We'll get to the prediction market map later, but in the state it has both North Carolina and Georgia in the likely blue column. They're a little more advantageous towards Democrats. I think it'll probably still be in the lean column, but the betting markets do have it with that, and I think Democrats are looking good in the state of Georgia. That's going to be the call there. And then we're going to head up to the state of New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, this state has voted blue, generally not quite as blue as, say, Minnesota, but still generally in the blue column. This state will be an interesting one to keep an eye on. I think that the Democrat will ultimately end up winning. We'll see what happens in that state though. And then we're going to head over, I think that will be the end of the lean blue states. Now we're going to go with lean red. I'm going to start with the state of Nebraska. I'm going to put that into the lean red column. Nothing too crazy here. Generally, the state is in the safe red column. The fact that Democrats, well, it's actually not a Democrat. The fact that independents can narrow it up from a safe red state all the way to lean red. Very impressive feat. Dan Osborne is a strong candidate. He did fall short 2 years ago when he ran for the Senate seat, but he is now in a much more favorable environment, and I think that that will help considerably. In 2024, he outperformed Harris by a really wide margin, so it'll be interesting to see if Republicans and Democrats and independents alike are able to elect an independent to the Senate. I should note that Nebraska isn't the only state with a prominent independent running. We can see here on the purple ratings that Montana also has an option for the independent to win. I think the Democrat is still in the Senate race in Montana, so that even less likely. But as far as Nebraska goes, last I heard, there is not a Democrat in this Senate race, so that will be easier for the independent to potentially secure victory. Like I said, I don't think it's most likely. I think it'll still remain in the Republican Party's column, but that's going to be the call there in Nebraska. Then I think the rest of these are going to be in the tilt column. We'll go with tilt red and tilt blue states. We'll go do some of each. So I'll start out with the tilt blue. We'll do 1 or 2 tilt blue and then 1 or 2 tilt red. So for the first tilt blue, we're going to call the state of Michigan. That state, I think if Democrats are going to lose a seat and Republicans are going to gain one, it would probably come with the state of Michigan. This seat is potentially concerning for Democrats. I do think at the most likely situation they will be winning it, but Republicans have a strong contender, so we'll see what happens there. And then Maine, this is going to be the second flip of the prediction. This state currently has a Republican senator, Susan Collins, fairly well known. She is up for re-election in a state that even Harris won by, if I remember correctly, about 4 points. So it's going to be an uphill battle for a Republican. There was some good news for the Collins campaign, though. Her Democratic opponent has had several scandals that have narrowed up the race. So I think in past predictions, I've had it in the lean blue column, but for now, I think because of that, it will narrow up to the tilt blue column, still in the Democratic Party's column, but that's going to be the call there. And then we'll go now to do some tilt red states. We're going to start with the state of Iowa. In past predictions, have had it in the lean red column, and I think it could potentially go by that margin, but we've seen the gubernatorial candidate performing quite well in the polls, and the Senate candidate not too far behind when it comes to the state of Iowa, so I think things are potentially going to be closer than Republicans are hoping. I still think it'll be a Republican. James Tallarico and Ken Paxton are running against each other. Tallarico is a very strong candidate, and I think he will perform well. In 2018, the state went to Ted Cruz by about 2.7%. The state that time it was against Ted Cruz for the other Senate seat, but this state will be a good one to keep your eye on. I think that Tallarico will probably do better than many people are expecting, but at the end of the day, Texas, at least at the moment, I think in the long run, it will become purple and potentially blue. But at the moment, I think this Republican lean of the state will be enough to give Ken Paxton a seat in the U.S. Senate. That's going to be the call there in Texas. And then that leaves us with these 2 remaining swing states that really will determine control of the Senate. We have Alaska and Ohio. I'm going to start with Alaska. I feel more confident in it. Alaska, I'm going to put in the tilt blue column. This state, that is going to be another flip from red to blue. So Maine, and then Alaska. This seat is currently held by a Republican, Dan Sullivan. And the betting markets seem to agree with me on this, that he is most likely going to lose his re-election bid. Mary Peltola, very strong candidate and a good year for Democrats, so that's going to be the call there. And then we finally have the state of Ohio. That will really be the deciding state, most likely, to determine which party wins control of the Senate. I've gone back and forth on this one. At the moment, I think the most likely situation is that it is the 4th flip for the Democratic Party. Sherrod Brown, he is actually a former senator from the state of Ohio. He held the other Senate seat in Ohio for a while and lost his re-election bid in 2024. That environment was really bad for Democrats, though, so he did end up losing that. But I think in a national environment more favorable towards Democrats, as well as not the strongest Republican nominee for this Senate seat, I think that the Democrat, Sherrod Brown, will probably be able to narrowly win this. It is Ohio, so it will be close. Generally, the state votes red, especially in recent elections. So I could certainly be wrong in the state of Ohio and potentially Alaska. Really, all of these tilt states could potentially go the other way. But if I had to make a call, that's probably what I would do. And now we can take a look. So this is going to be 51 to 49, a majority. We can now take a look at the consensus map. This map is going to be a little bit more favorable to the Republicans. However, it's pretty similar in regards to mine if it will load. But that's going to be the call there. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.